Disney has officially decided to cancel the Snow White premiere in London, reportedly out of fear of an anti-woke backlash. But let's be honest, if there's one place on Earth where they wouldn't have to worry about that, it's London. The city is practically a smaller, condensed version of California in terms of ideology. According to an insider who spoke with the Daily Mail, Disney is anticipating heavy criticism surrounding Snow White, which is why they've drastically limited the media schedule to just a handful of carefully controlled press events. And we all know why. Rachel Zegler's unfiltered comments have landed her in hot water before. If you disagree, feel free to hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business, thanks. But here's the thing. It's not just about the premiere or press events. Just 2 days ago, Zegler was in Japan promoting Snow White, saying, "We are in Tokyo promoting Snow White. It's my first time here in Japan, and everyone has been so hospitable." Smart move? Maybe. If you're Snow White and need a softer reception, Japan is a safe bet. People there are too polite to openly criticize you. But despite the careful PR strategy, the damage is already done. What do you think? Is Disney playing it safe, or is this just another sign of a doomed movie? While Japan is known for being polite, they're still not as eager as Western nations to cater to Hollywood's latest ideological narratives. But let's be real. If avoiding backlash was Disney's concern, why cancel the London premiere, but still hold press events in Tokyo? It's not about people criticizing Rachel Zegler online. That happens everywhere. And it's definitely not about some supposed anti-woke backlash in London, because let's face it, that doesn't exist there. So what does that leave us with? The answer is clear. It's the woke crowd Disney is actually worried about. Meanwhile, the marketing itself feels inconsistent. They travel all the way to Tokyo to do promotional events, making a big deal about hearing the lyrics in a different language, only to have Zegler sing in English. Talk about mixed messaging. And let's not forget the fashion choices. People are still wondering why her Oscar look was more Snow White than her actual Snow White costume in the film. So, what do you think? Is Disney's PR strategy falling apart? Or do they know something we don't? It seems Disney is becoming increasingly aware that the real threat to their film's success isn't just online backlash. It's the journalists themselves. Why skip the London premiere? It's not about avoiding anti-woke criticism. London is one of the most ideologically aligned places with Hollywood's messaging. No, the real issue seems to be the media personalities Rachel Zegler would be speaking to, the London-based Western journalists who thrive on controversy. We've seen this media tactic before: bait actors into making statements that generate outrage, then cash in on the clicks. Just recently, another actress expertly shut down a journalist trying to stir drama. Journalist: how does it feel like the movie is being impacted by everything happening in the world? Actress: what happened? I did AI, and the last year of my life has just gone. But I've heard the movie is up. This kind of maneuvering is becoming more common. We saw Brie Larson struggle with this in past interviews when she realized the media weren't her friends. In Snow White's case, it's not just about journalists fishing for controversy, it's about whether Disney is willing to sacrifice the success of their own movie just to push a narrative. So, what do you think? Is Disney trying to control the conversation, or are they just digging their own grave? Disney's latest move makes one thing clear. They're not afraid of fans, they're afraid of journalists. The studio has drastically cut down the media schedule for Snow White, limiting press engagements to a handful of tightly controlled events. And the reason? They know that Rachel Zegler is unpredictable when put on the spot, and the last thing they want is for her to go viral for the wrong reasons. Japan? No problem. The media there aren't focused on stirring controversy. But in London, where journalists share Disney's ideological beliefs, the situation is different. These reporters know exactly what questions to ask to push an agenda, and Zegler, seeing them as allies, might say something Disney can't afford to defend. A red carpet premiere with rapid-fire questions? Too risky. Instead, Disney is playing it safe, small, controlled interviews where PR reps can step in at any moment. Any controversial statements, easily edited out. At this point, Snow White isn't just a movie, it's a $270 million crisis that Disney is desperately trying to manage. What do you think? Is Disney being overly cautious, or are they just trying to contain a disaster of their own making? Disney's handling of Snow White highlights a growing issue in Hollywood. The belief that audiences are the problem, not the content itself. The studio has drastically reduced the film's media schedule, limiting Rachel Zegler's press interactions to avoid backlash. But why? Because they know the moment she speaks freely, controversy follows. They aren't worried about critics in Japan, where the press is less confrontational. They're worried about journalists in London, journalists who share Disney's ideological stance but still want viral headlines. This is a symptom of a much deeper problem in the industry. Many filmmakers and executives believe their message is inherently correct, even when audiences reject it. To them, the backlash isn't proof that they've made something people don't want. It's proof that people just don't understand what's good for them. The solution? Not changing the product, but hiding it. Editing out too truthful statements, controlling press interactions, and carefully packaging narratives to trick audiences into consuming them. It's a mindset perfectly illustrated in Hollywood's recent self-reflection projects, like Seth Rogen's upcoming The Studio, a comedy about the movie business. On the surface, it seems like a critique of the industry. But will it ask the real question, are we the problem? Unlikely. Instead, it'll focus on mocking everything except the very ideology that's driving audiences away. At this point, Hollywood doesn't just want to make content, they want to make sure you accept it. And if you don't, well, that's your problem, not theirs. What do you think? Can Hollywood course correct, or are they too far gone? Disney canceling the Snow White premiere in London isn't about anti-woke backlash, it's about damage control. They know Rachel Zegler's interviews can spiral into controversy, and they know Western journalists who share their ideological stance will push her to say something divisive for clicks. Instead of addressing the real issue, their own messaging, they simply limit media exposure and blame fans for any backlash. Hollywood has increasingly distanced itself from general audiences, dismissing criticism as bigotry instead of considering whether their content is actually entertaining. We've seen it in Star Wars, Marvel, and countless other franchises. The response to fan dissatisfaction? You're just a bad person if you don't like this. Hollywood elites view themselves as cultural gatekeepers. They mock influencers for taking over red carpets and lament that entertainment is no longer reserved for the worthy. They see themselves as the enlightened few, tasked with educating the ignorant masses, even if it means tricking them into consuming ideologically driven content. The real issue isn't that audiences are rejecting Hollywood. The issue is that Hollywood refuses to accept why. Instead of adapting, they double down, gaslight fans, and manipulate the narrative to shift blame away from themselves. At this rate, can Hollywood even turn itself around? Or is the industry too lost in its own echo chamber? It's becoming increasingly clear that Hollywood cares more about pushing an agenda than actually making profitable entertainment. Shows like The Boys are openly reframed as right-wing satires by their creators. Statements that tank their own audience engagement, all because journalists bait them into revealing their ideological stance. These journalists don't care about the industry's success. They care about proving a point, even at the expense of Hollywood's own profitability. The irony? Actors and filmmakers are starting to recognize that the media is their biggest enemy. Take Mads Mikkelsen, for example. When a journalist tried to corner him with a loaded question about lack of diversity in a Danish production, he didn't just take the bait. Instead, he turned the question back on the journalist, forcing him to share the same scrutiny. It's a rare moment where Hollywood figures push back rather than groveling for approval. Yet, despite these realizations, the industry refuses to take the obvious path forward, aligning with the audience. Hollywood could fix itself by telling stories that resonate with people rather than lecturing them. But instead, they